this move towards digital, how has that provided change, if you like, in terms of that approach to data privacy and data privacy compliance?
I think it's a cultural change, and it will take time to get there fully. But I think it's a retail perspective is different. So rather than being a product manufacturer, to really seeing that retail focus puts the importance on the data that you hold. So I think that gives it a key. So I think we're much more becoming a data business where data is at the heart of it. So the importance of it is recognised much more. And I think that that means it's a little bit like, I draw a parallel with treating customers fairly, which in the financial services, people will know the FCA have been driving for a number of years. And it took a long time to build that into everything you do. And I think privacy by design is for us, it's like our treating customers fairly again. It's thinking in all that we do as a data business, what are the privacy considerations, the privacy implications for our customers? And that's a real change from how our business was even 5 years ago.
Okay. And Neil, could you, this is probably too difficult a question to summarise, but could you summarise sort of what your main DP hurdles or challenges have been as you've approached the digital route?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one is the obvious one, which is how do you deal with customers and explain to them what you're doing with data to produce these benefits and these results. So, particularly where we've got customers who have multiple products with us, we've got a lot of different data points that we can pull together to help understand what other products they might need and how to price those. So historically when you've been buying insurance products, you just get asked a whole load of questions and you have to sit there and it's very tedious to answer them, and that's not the kind of frictionless customer experience that we're trying to design. So what we want to do is be able, without asking you any questions ideally, to be able to put a proper proposal to you and say, if you need some home insurance, as Kevin's example, here's the price for it, it's guaranteed. We don't need to ask you any more questions because we've been able to pull together all of the data we need to understand your risk and price your risk accurately.
And Neil, there's a significant risk transfer going on there as well, isn't there? So if you're not asking the customer the questions, you're effectively taking the risk on as the insurer. I think that's going to be a significant development over time with insurance, and that's something certainly Aviva are looking to do for customers.
But I think, and I think that's right. And I think as we go in that direction, the way in which we think about use of data and consent to use data is really rapidly evolving. And I think it goes to the privacy by design point as well. Whereas historically, I think we'd have to admit that the way in which we looked at this was very much kind of at the end of the process. You'd have some boxes to tick to make sure that you had the right consents and permissions to do whatever it is you wanted to do with the customer data, and that was kind of static. It's moving to a much more both transparent and always moving process. So I think what we want to get to is a point where we're actually having a real dialogue with customers to explain to them and inform them what it is we're doing with their data and why it's a good thing and why it's providing benefits to them. And as we innovate and develop how we use their data, the way in which we describe that to customers needs to change, and that's quite rapid. So I think we've gone from you've kind of designed what it looks like and what your policy is, and that just sits there and doesn't really change very much over time, to something which is constantly changing. And I think that's we're still definitely on that journey. We definitely haven't got to the end point, and perhaps as we continue to innovate, there isn't a single end point, but it's much more having a dynamic policy, I think, is the direction we're heading in. Rather
so moving from static to the just-in-time policies that we know the ICO wants us to introduce. Can I just ask you though? I mean, isn't there a concern with customer perception? Because you've just described to me a situation where you can sell something or offer to a customer something without them putting any data in, because you can say, we've already got all of this data on you, this is tailored for you. Isn't that just a bit creepy? Like, are your customers not going to think that's weird? So before you answer, I don't know if anybody's in charge of air conditioning, but it's really hot in here. Yeah? There's a lot of people in the audience who are wafting there. Thank you. Back to the creepy question.
Yeah. I think we are conscious there is a risk of that, particularly in particular types of insurance, which are perhaps a little bit more sensitive to people to think about health insurance, life insurance. How do you know this stuff to be able to price it? I haven't given you any information about my health. So that's something we're just really conscious you have to tread quite carefully, and you have to, not all customers are the same. So there'll be plenty of people out there, and sometimes it's a generational thing we've discovered where younger generations particularly are a bit more comfortable with sharing data and allowing you to use it because they see the benefit of it more directly. Other demographics perhaps a bit less so. So there's a bit of a journey for people to understand why there's a benefit to them. And I think the other point to note is we're not necessarily going to force this on people. It's a process where we absolutely have to put the customer at the centre of our thinking, build the privacy into the design of the products and the propositions, and bring people along on that journey so that they don't feel it's creepy. They see the benefits outweighing any kind of creep factor.
Okay. I know just from some of the work we've done with you that there was another challenge that you faced, which is internal. So we've talked, when I asked you about challenge, you've been talking about perception, customer perception, but, do you want to just talk for a minute about the internal perception within your organisation regarding this sort of pooling of data within digital?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I was saying at the start. It's an organisation that's been around since the 17th century. It's got a lot of very traditional mindsets, and we've historically been organised in product silos rather than being a truly customer-centric organisation. So there was real territoriality about ownership of data within the organisation, and which business unit had control over it and could effectively decide whether or not it could be used for other purposes within the group. So it's been a real interesting process to move away from that model and towards a model of greater data sharing. And so we've had to think very carefully about where we set our tolerances and our risk appetites at a group level, and trying to get to one kind of view of what is appropriate and what's not appropriate, rather than having this proliferation of views internally about interpretation of use of data and data privacy. So, and again, that's something which we definitely haven't got to the end point on, but it's been part of one of the more significant challenges actually of bringing the direct relationships with the customers out of the old manufacturing business units and into a new digital intermediary is getting people's mindsets into a place where they're comfortable giving that control away, and that's just from an internal perspective has been a
we found certainly when we were working with you that you've got some very good, capable advisors internally on data privacy, but there's some quite big challenges, particularly with GDPR coming down the line, and so you were asking people not only to look towards compliance in the future, but also a complete change of structure. And it was an opportunity, I think, for all of us to share a view, I think, which is shared in this room generally, which is that the move to digital and this the normalization that we're going to get, the generational shift, and that people will be used to having their data profiled so that you can offer products, is actually something which will help them comply rather than will cause compliance issues. So there was sort of an internal training and learning process.
Yeah, and as I say, there definitely were divergent views at the start of the process where the digital part of the business was very keen to be able to do everything, and some of the more traditional parts of the business were very nervous because they saw that as data which they had sourced directly from their customer, and they didn't want anything to happen to that data which they thought was in any way out of line with where their risk appetite has traditionally been set, and so there is that education process, but there's a very strong emphasis from the top of the organisation on the digital strategy, and that was helpful in terms of clearing the way on some of the issues.
And the agile nature of an innovative business means that it tends to be small changes frequently, and so the whole point is that you're always learning. So on the screen I showed where we had the roundels with the prices in, it shows if you put to say that there's a discount of 20% or whatever, customers are more likely to click on it than not. But if you actually get more personalised and more individual, saying this is the price for you, actually it gets a better response, particularly if you're able to demonstrate quite clearly to them what data you're relying on, that there's good transparency around it and good sort of an opportunity for live chat and people to ask those sort of questions online is really, really helpful
So-
in that engagement.